Welcome to another edition of the Sabre Spotlight on the Marian Sports Network. And some exciting news was announced earlier this semester in the athletic department as Marian University will be adding men's and women's bowling for the 2019-2020 academic year. And I've got head coach Dan Miller with us here today. Coach, exciting stuff for Marian, isn't it, to add bowling?
Very exciting. Looking forward to recruiting and to have the new year start as soon as we can.
Now, you're recently named the new head coach for Marian Bowling, but you are a veteran to the Marian campus, I guess you can say, because you've been in the athletic department in the past.
I have. Back in the late 80s, I worked here. I coached some girls softball for a year and then helped out with, at that time, the new baseball program that was starting up.
When we talk about collegiate bowling, both at the men's and the women's level, is that a sport that is on the rise when it comes to the NCAA, and on the men's side is still technically, I guess, a club?
Yeah, it is. The women's programs over the last 10 years or so have grown to the point where they now have an NCAA championship type finish at the end of the year where the guys don't. But overall across the United States, it's grown a lot in the last 10 years.
Can I ask you what intrigued you about coming back to Marian University when you heard that the bowling program was starting up?
Well, I'm a Holy Lander, if people would know that from just west or east of Fond du Lac here. But I've been in Fond du Lac for 25 years and coached and raised my kids through here. So to have the opportunity to come back and give something back to the community is a big part of it.
How would you assess what bowling is like, not only in our area, into the Fox Valley and the state of Wisconsin, when it comes to bowling at the youth level as you bring potential student athletes into Marian?
I think it's a ever-growing sport. I was just at a tournament yesterday that several years ago probably had about 50 or 60 kids in it, and yesterday there was over 120 kids that were at the tournament. It's growing. Some of the smaller houses maybe have a tougher time staying afloat, but overall the youth programs and the junior programs are abundant.
And you mentioned there are a ton of junior programs. It seems like pretty much every community, whether it's sponsored through a high school or just through a local organization, they have bowling at the youth level, because I know there's a long, rich history of bowling in Wisconsin, and it's still strong with the youth.
It is, and that goes back to, I believe, your proprietors of your houses that are trying to promote something that bowling you can do pretty much your whole life. So whether you're 6 or 90, you can still go out and do it. So it's a growing sport in Wisconsin, the Valley area. Many of the high schools have teams, so it's a great place to try to get some of these young student athletes to stay home and be able to bowl in this area.
What types of things do you look for in a student athlete when you're pitching them, not only the startup of the Marian bowling program on the men's and women's side, but also the university?
Well, I think it's a little different than when you're starting a high school team. When you're starting a high school team, you basically have kids that have probably grown up together over the last 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years. And now I'm going to look for the student athlete that's a bowler first, of course, but I look for the ones that maybe are more team oriented. Bowling is a team thing, especially at the college level where you're doing what's called the Baker system, as well as you're going to take kids from a big city like Chicago or the burbs, or Minnesota or Minneapolis, and then you're going to take Manawa, Wisconsin, or you're going to take North Fond du Lac or whatever, and you're going to take kids and you're going to have to mesh them into teammates. And so I think it's a bigger step than it would be. They're not going to know each other, and so it's going to be a tough thing for me as a coach to find that right fit for all of them.
What is it like so far? You've been on the staff here for a couple of months. You have about a year, I guess, to get a program ready to go and compete at matches across the Midwest. What is it like in this year? What do you have to accomplish in the year besides just getting bowlers and student athletes on campus?
Well, we have to set up our program to be able to find tournaments to go to. There is a vast variety of them on websites where I can, email them, talk to them, try to figure out if they have openings within their tournaments, and then of course figure out a budget for that, and then in the process of that work around schedules of the students and everything else. So
haven't looked for any tournaments like in Hawaii or anything to
No.
talk to athletic director Jason Bartelt? Hey, this would be a great tournament.
I imagine Jason would like to go along if we went over there, but no, I'm basically the Midwest, Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, There's a couple down in Indiana that are still within drivable range that we'd like to go to.
When it comes to roster size on the men's and women's side, what consists a bowling team?
Well, there's 5 bowlers that would be on the starting team on each side per match. I would like to carry at least 7 or 8 varsity guys and girls to tournaments that we go to. I think the ultimate goal would be to have both a varsity and a JV team on both sides. So we're looking at 10 to 12 or so bowlers for each side.
You mentioned like the Baker system and kind of talk a little bit about how tournaments run at the collegiate level. Can you kind of talk about how you compete when you go to tournaments, what happens, and how they score and things like that?
Sure. So if we go to a tournament, we would go. Let's say we go to Illinois for a tournament, and on a Saturday morning, I'll set a lineup out there, and the 5 bowlers will bowl. Depending on the tournament, but 5 to 6 games of regular bowling, like you would know for a league or whatever. And then that team total goes towards a total together. And then from there, you'll bowl the next day, you'll bowl the Baker system. And the Baker system is you put 5 bowlers out there, and the first bowler bowls the first frame and the 6th frame, the 2nd frame, and the 7th frame, and so on for your 5 bowlers. And that's a team score. And then those 10 to 15 games will be a team score. And then you take your first day's totals, your second day totals, and then you put them together, and then you're positioned to bowl head-to-head.
Now, on the women's side, the NCAA does sponsor a national championship on the women's
Correct.
side for bowling, and there's really not a Division I, Division II, Division III, whether it's Marian University or, say, the University of Wisconsin. If they sponsor a bowling team, it's all compacted into one group?
It is all compacted into one group. I actually had the pleasure of going down and watching a tournament down in Milwaukee a couple weekends ago, and it had 16 of the top 24 teams in the United States. And it was everything from the University of Nebraska to Stephen F. Austin to Whitewater, Wisconsin.
Who are some of the bowling powers in NCAA bowling?
On the girls' side, it would be Nebraska. They've won probably, I'm going to misquote me, but at least 6 of the last 10 years. Stephen F. Austin. Whitewater's up there. Whitewater's always competed. They've always placed over the years. Robert Morris University out of Illinois is another good program that has both men and women as well.
And on the men's side, not NCAA sanctioned as of yet, but there still is kind of an organized group of teams that play.
Yes. There's still a good amount of teams. It's just the way the NCAA has chosen to do it. There's not enough teams to create that championship at the end of the year.
Is there a chance for Marian to join a conference? Are there bowling conferences across the United States?
There are, and they're more or less by regions. The one that we'd like to go into would be the one here for the Midwest. There's about a dozen state schools, and then we would compete with them as well as several in Minnesota and several in Illinois.
So when you have a conference, you don't have technically set head-to-head type meets, but what do they do when they play conference meets and matches in bowling?
Well, they'll do the same concept
Okay.
I just talked about, where they'll bowl on a Saturday, they'll bowl individual, they'll bowl on a Sunday, and then from there you'll be placed accordingly, and you bowl head-to-head, and then you get points by how you place within those tournaments.
What do you anticipate a practice schedule being like for a collegiate bowler?
Well, of course, it depends on their as being a student first, but I would like to see at least 2 team practices per week, and we'll do that over here at Ledgeview Lanes right here in town. And then the individuals will break down their class schedules, and we'll try to get at least a couple hours a week of bowling practice, more one-on-one with the coaches.
Well, Coach Miller, it's exciting stuff, and I know that you've already had some commits, some student athletes finding out that bowling was coming to Marian, and you've already got a start on the 2019, inaugural squad for men's and women's bowling. And we've also had a lot of alumni from Marian make contact, because I can tell you when this announcement got made, I got contacted by a lot of people. I know other people on campus were real excited to hear that bowling was now on the intercollegiate athletic docket at Marian.
They were, and I mean, I have previous kids that I used to coach back in the late 80s, as well as many friends through the Marian program that were either offering assistance to be an assistant coach, or joking, coming back, going, I have 2 years of eligibility left. I'd like to come back and bowl 2 years more, but.
And you said it maybe a season or two before you can organize a tournament here in Fond du Lac. So you're probably going to be road warriors for the first few years while you get the program up and running.
Correct. Most of the time we'll be on the road to start with. Some local, some just over the borders. But we'll definitely look into it after the first year and see what it would take to put a program tournament together.
If a potential student athlete that's interested in bowling is watching this right now, how would they get in contact with you about potentially becoming a Sabre?
Well, they can go to the Marian website, and I can't even recite that off the top of my head.
SabreAthletics.com.
SabreAthletics.com. And I believe there's a bowling link on there now, and you can fill out the paperwork. But other than that, if you wanted to, my email address is drmueller45@marianuniversity.edu.
Sounds good. Marian University adding men's and women's bowling for the 2019-2020 academic year. He's head coach Dan Miller, and you've been watching a Sabre Spotlight on the Marian Sports Network.